The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Mike, last time we were on, I had mentioned that the singing intro will be back. I was going to do Rockstar by Nickelback, but my inner coward came out. But of course, that would have been perfect for our guest today, who is Ashley Kirwan, the co-founder of Orix Geoscience. I thought it was a great time with Ashley, but I will not be singing the intro.
Well, I think that's probably for the best. I think
Nickelback's a tough sing. I think, especially on a podcast.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I had a momentary pause there as I was trying to think of like how that song actually goes, and now that I do, I think you made the right call. So good sticking to your guns there. But no, we were thrilled to talk to Ashley on the podcast today. She's somebody who I think we've seen speak at various events. Her and her co-founder Shastri throughout the years. So she's been somebody who, like I'd mentioned in our conversation, that has been on my radar for a while now because she does such a great job, I think, talking about, what Orix does, but I think also kind of inspiring you, where the company is going, what they've been able to build. I know certainly, as I'd mentioned, Zoe's not as much into a rock collection these days, but I think I've got a lot of things I can pull out from Ashley's advice to maybe kind of encourage her down the road. But yeah, I just thought it was just a really great conversation. I think Orix is doing some really interesting things. And again, the fact that Ashley's relocated to Sudbury is just great news for our community. But obviously they're continuing to do great work, not only here, but in Toronto and Winnipeg.
Well, and they're looking to grow more in Sudbury, which is just great news for the local ecosystem. But Ashley will tell you more about that as we go to her and the interview we did with her.
So we're now back, and we're pleased to be joined by Ashley Kirwan. Ashley is a professional geologist and the co-founder, president, and CEO at Orix Geoscience, a geological consultant firm advancing strategic exploration and mining to meet client milestones through the integration of data and innovative geological understanding. With 70 plus diverse employees, 100% female owned and 50% female employees, Orix focuses on a healthy corporate culture, high quality of work, and strong industry partnerships operating within their 3 offices in Toronto, Sudbury, and Winnipeg. Ashley was named among the 100 Global Inspirational Women in Mining in 2016, awarded the Distinguished Alumni Rising Star Award from Laurentian University in 2018, selected as a top 40 under 40 Sudbury in 2019, and awarded the YWCA Women of Distinction Award in 2020, and the Ira Thomas, Young Mining Professional Award in 2020. Orix celebrated their 10-year work anniversary this year and was named Sudbury Company of the Year in 2022. I got the chance to be at that award ceremony and got to hear you talk about the journey, but we're happy to have you here today, Ashley, on the Unlikely Innovators, to hear you talk more about it today.
Thank you so much, Mike and Steve. I'm happy to be here.
Yo, it's our pleasure. So we always like to start off, asking our guests kind of their journey before we kind of dive into what Orix does and how it's revolutionizing the industry. But we wanted to kind of start with, what made you want to get into geology? Was it always something that you had a passion for when you were younger, or was it, maybe a mentor along the way that kind of steered you in that direction?
Yeah, so I was not a kid that had a rock collection. I'm from Sudbury, so I grew up, I was raised in Sudbury, but not really involved in the mining sector. My parents did not work in mining at all. As a lot of kids that do grow up in the north, you want to, experience part of the world. So I went to Laurentian University and I took geography because I wanted to travel, and I thought that I could try to find a job that I could get paid to travel. I was an arts kid. I wasn't into science in high school at all. In university, when you're in the arts, you do have to take one science elective. And so I took geology. And I was very fortunate that my first year professor, Dr. Pearson, who lots of people in Sudbury might know, he spearheaded the start of Science North, amongst many other things. He was my first year professor, and he was infectious, and he hooked me with learning about plate tectonics and the origin of the universe and volcanoes. And I remember just thinking, like, is this really a job? Like, is this something that people get to learn about all the time? I just found it so interesting. I've also learned, almost recently, that I am a very visual learner. And in geology, there's lots of images and you learn lots of concepts that way. And so he was the one that really hooked me. and then, confided in a few different people at the university and really learned that it is an artistic science. And I think sometimes young people, specifically females too, think that you have to be a traditional scientist, right? In high school, you have to have the top marks in math and physics to want to be a scientist, and that's absolutely not the case. And so I took the risk. Some people gave me a push, and I decided to switch, and I haven't looked back.
That's incredible. I just in thinking about Dr. Pearson, do you remember he had Down to Earth? I think it was on
Yes.
either before or after the news. I remember
Yeah.
seeing that. That was sort of a formational time. But I mean, like, I think Sebrio is the man of debt, of course, like
Yeah.
for the amount of community building through science. But I just always remember that Down to Earth show, and he had that
Yeah,
sort of
definitely. Well, and
like,
he's still doing lots of work.
yeah.
Yeah. But I do remember that show for sure.
Yeah, I remember it had like a halfway corny mid-90s like theme song that maybe I could find it on YouTube.
I'm sure you can YouTube that. You might be able to integrate it into this interview someday.
Yeah, well, I think that's such a good story. So you obviously then, you get into geology, um, and then like obviously what we now know you for in the industry is for Orix. Could you talk a bit about how that came about, and then do tell us, of course, and the listeners what Orix does and how it's different, and what you're doing to change the world?
To change the world for sure. So I definitely was fortunate that I went to school in Sudbury. So then throughout my summers and even during school, I had the opportunity to work with lots of different companies within Sudbury. So I worked for different exploration companies, worked for the government. So by the time I graduated, I had full-time employment with a junior exploration company. I worked there for about 7 years and worked with really, really fantastic people. One of the people is actually my current business partner. Her name's Shastri. And we worked really well together. And after a period of time, we both decided to leave that company and go to Nevada. So we wanted something different. We worked for a very junior gold company. And then a year later, the company got acquired. And so we were essentially going our own ways. We were looking at what the next career path would be. But then, Shastri was talking about this concept of a consulting company. And so at that point, we had two choices. One, we are going to go our separate ways and obviously still be friends. Or the second one is let's go and let's try this thing out and see if it works. So it really started because we had found each other years ago. We liked working with each other. We trusted each other. There was a yin and a yang of different skill sets and personalities. So we had the ability of co-founding this company with two people, which was really, really amazing. I know lots of people that are entrepreneurs that are sole entrepreneurs, and it's a little tough, right? It does get lonely and it's hard work. And so we had the two of us, and that was in 2012. So that was about 10 years ago. At the time, there was lots of junior exploration companies that had really great projects, but they did not have a team, and they also had a really hard time raising money. At the time, it was 2012. The markets had crashed. They needed to still advance their projects, but they had no money and they had no team. So that was really the original strategic business plan, was to focus on juniors. So not necessarily service the major mining companies, but really focus on the juniors that have good opportunities, but they need help, they need expertise, and they need a team that they can kind of turn off and on as they need to. So really, for the first few years, we really just worked with juniors. And then through the years, growing the company organically, we now work with all the major companies as well as essentially an extension of their exploration team. So Steve, you asked what exactly does Orix do? So I am a geologist, and my business partner is a geologist as well. So our niche is geology. Essentially, what we are trying to do and what we help people do is understand their rocks, understand the ground beneath their feet. Lots of companies need to make decisions on where to drill, how to explore, but there's lots of puzzle pieces that you could put together to save time and money and be more effective. So we really support exploration companies to understand all of their data, turn that into information, and then really help them drive their exploration projects forward.
I think
Thank you for remembering the second half of my very long-winded
Yeah, for
question.
sure.
That was that was
It was
pretty
a
impressive.
three-parter, I think.
Yeah, you did well.
It was a very impressive,
You saved
impressive
me.
answer for sure.
Yeah.
No, I think you asked it in a good way, Steve. You're not
Thank you.
known for
Thank you,
long-winded
Michael.
questions, but what we'll probably dive back into, I think exactly some of the work that Orix is doing, especially on the data side now. But I just kind of wanted to ask this because it's something that I remember when we had first talked maybe a few years back, that, the Orix tagline of come for the science and stay for the culture. And obviously in reading your bio, we talked about how culture is an emphasis of the company. But can you talk a little bit about how you've placed an emphasis on culture at Orix and how that sets it apart from not only other geological firms, but just other firms in general?
Yeah, definitely. So when we started the company, I think most people who have ever worked have probably have an experience of working for companies that they really liked and working for other companies that maybe they didn't necessarily like. And it's for a variety of reasons. And so maybe you go to work one day and you have that kind of weight on your shoulder. I've experienced both, as well as my business partner. So it was very, very clear to us, without us really making that part of the business plan, that the reason originally that we started the company is because we wanted to enjoy to come to work every day. It was a little bit selfish. We created the company because we wanted to essentially take our lives, not just our working lives, but our whole lives in our own hands. And so we not only saw a business opportunity on the technical side, but an opportunity to create a culture right from day one. So we created our value system, the way that Orix operates, the kinds of people that we want to hire. We did this because we believe our values, and we want to really work with people that have integrity, that work hard, but have integrity. We used to say, any one of our employees or somebody that you would be okay going and having a beer with or a coffee with. It's really great people. And the same goes for our clients. So we're at the point right now of also holding our clients accountable and really choosing to work with people in the industry that have integrity, that also believe in good corporate culture, because it's easier. It saves time, it saves energy, it's more fun too. It's hard sometimes being an entrepreneur. So we want to like the people we work with, we want to like our clients. We want to work hard too, but do it with people that you can laugh with at the end of the day. So it really started with the owners of the company, Shastri and myself, deciding that it's really important to focus on interpersonal skill sets and having people that actually listen and use good judgment, have good communication skills. Yes, they have a geology degree, but they've got that other secret sauce there. And so we've been, it's a pretty hard rule of us that's really the things that we look for in people, right from interviews to promotions, to our growth strategy is really a big focus is corporate culture. In mining, like other industries, but specifically in mining, it is a cyclical industry. Mining is known to hire people and then lay them off, and hire people and lay them off. So there's a group of people in the industry that have left and that have not stayed. And it's not a secret that there is a workforce shortage in every industry now, but there has also been in mining and geology for years and years and years. And if we want to, build the road to sustainability, green energy, all those things that we really want to talk about, it will require more geologists, and it will require more people staying in mining and in geology. So retention to us is really big. It's been one of the things that the corporate culture side of it isn't only because we want to enjoy our experience, but it's certain things that we've implemented have been helpful to retain our employees. Especially, even during COVID and things like that, we've got very high retention, and our goal is to weather all the cycles. So to have a good business model with great employees that we can keep over a long run and not fall into that cycle of hiring and laying off and hiring and laying off. It takes a while to train somebody, to develop someone, and then to just have to let them go. And hopefully you can find that all-star talent years later. It's very tough.
Yeah, and my gosh, not to make it a sort of well, this is a good commercial for Orix Geoscience, but I think what's interesting is in a culture now or an investment and stakeholder culture, they're looking not only at the performance, the ESG performance of the mining companies, but also the contractors they hire. So Orix seems like a safe choice, if you're taking it on, because if you're looked at from an ESG perspective, and you're part of that sort of supply chain that feeds that junior mining company. That's a positive thing that you've made that investment to be, ESG minded from the beginning, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we're actually doing a few different initiatives around ESG, and specifically not just diversity, but more initiatives around even health and safety and environment and things like that. But interestingly enough, it sometimes, like, we've almost flipped the consultant model, and it's been interesting because the junior explorers in our space haven't necessarily been as mature in their organizations. Like, the major companies are definitely focused on ESG and that, and increasing the diversity, right? But it's been interesting with juniors that don't necessarily have a team and kind of need some guidance, where, because our team is quite diverse and we bring that perspective, that due diligence, like trying to help them raise their bar. By partnering with Orix, we essentially are making them more diverse and bringing that innovation and that new perspective to them, because we do like to consider ourselves an extension of their team. So our clients are not arm's length. We text them, we call them, they're at the office. So we try to make it that we are one team. So for the juniors, it's interesting that by partnering with our team, we essentially are kind of adding that.
Yeah, and it's an important part. I want to talk about, this seems like it's shifting gears, but this will tie in well, just trust me. I think it was like 8 or 9 years ago, I first saw Shastri pitch Orix Geoscience locally here in Sudbury. And one of the things that I found sort of, maybe I shouldn't have been so shocked by it, but just the amount of paper records that Orix was endeavoring to sort of solve for a lot of companies in the geology space. It made me think, like, I've done a lot of startup consulting, and everyone says, it's important to be a data company, right? So
Right.
that you could future-proof, the value statement of the company. How has Orix Geoscience also sort of embraced being a data company, more than just a consulting company?
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like over the last couple of years, we've been asked that question a few times, and now we're giving more talks on the data science realm. But interestingly enough, like, really from day one, the whole goal of understanding the ground beneath a client's feet, putting the puzzle pieces together, we always started with what data is available, whether it's paper data and it's a warehouse full of 400 bankers boxes and 400 map tubes and floppy disks and CDs and all those things that we
I remember those
on this
things.
call, right? We all
those
remember
things?
that.
Yeah.
Many companies just don't look at that because it's intimidating. You don't know what to do. They don't have enough time. So then you do work and you repeat work, or you're not being as efficient. So really from the start, we tried to find that balance of finding out what data was available for our clients. So respecting the history and the people that have actually done work before. Getting that data to a usable format, which may require a lot of scanning. Again, it's tedious and it takes a refined process, but there's amazing things to be found in the historical paper records. Extracting those CDs, those floppy disks, those servers, all of those things. And then now that you've got your data and it's in a usable format, now you can turn that into information. Now we can really squeeze that, we can compile it, we can analyze it before we even set foot on the ground and put that drill hole in our map. It saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of money, and it fills in those gaps if you use that historical data. So, like, we personally feel like it's going back to first principles. We're not in the space of artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think sometimes sometimes people ask us about that. We're really in fundamental first principle data consolidation, compilation, review. We do partner with different groups that then take the data to another level, but there's a lot of companies right now that need even that first principle organization and compiling. And so that's really where our secret sauce is taking all of that data, turning it into information, and then exploring.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't believe how many times we work with pretty big companies, and the amount of Excel spreadsheets that whole company runs on,
Yes.
with absolutely no way of gleaning business information and insights, right?
Yeah, and there's duplicate data, like in
Yeah, sure, yeah.
mining. there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions that happen. And again, because it's a cyclical industry, there's companies that scoop up other ones. And when you scoop up a company, you buy a company, you're buying all of their servers too, and
Mhm.
their hard drives, and so then you just get a mess of digital data that often just gets archived. It goes in Steve's C drive folder or
Yeah, yeah.
Mike's documents, and
Yeah.
then nobody ever looks at it, right? So we have our own software team as well, who's full time with Orix, and they really focus on the data crunching, the data cleaning. So when
Yeah.
we get a project like that, we can more efficiently look through all the data and then actually, work with the original data sets.
Hugely valuable. Hugely
Yeah.
valuable.
I wanted to go back to our earlier part about culture, because you're talking about how Orix obviously places a premium on integrity and interpersonal skills, and I think a big part of that we didn't get to is that also includes not being an asshole. And I'll credit you because you were the one that introduced me to the book, The No Asshole Rule by Robert
Yes.
Sutton. I can't remember where it was, but you and Shastri did a presentation, and I was in the audience, and you brought up this book. I'm like, I've never heard of this book before.
Yeah.
It sounds like I should read it. And so I read it, and obviously I think you can probably talk a little bit about how you've applied it to Orix. But I guess one of the things I was going to ask you, just from a practical perspective, is that I think when you go through, the interviewing process and you bring somebody on board, like how do you weed out the
Mhm.
a-hole, so to speak, so that they don't, become a part of the company and then you have a long-term problem? And so just your take on how Orix has, I think, successfully adopted that principle and use that to kind of help the company
Yeah.
kind of reinforce those principles.
Yeah, for sure. So as well, from day one, we have a no hassle policy, and we've applied it more to the clients. Honestly,
Yes.
like we want to work with good people. I want to hire good people. We also want to work with good people. So for the clients specifically, it comes down to due diligence. It's our industry is small. It's 1 to 2 degrees of separation. So you lose some, you win some, but in general, somebody that's worked with someone. Everybody makes mistakes, so that's not what we're talking about. It's people that are ethical, that really believe in good science, that believe in good geology, definitely have to please shareholders, but recognize that the science is important also. So for clients, it becomes due diligence. Before we take on a client, we do reference checks to our network. If we don't know them, most of the time we know them. So you look at history. It's the same, pretty much the same due diligence that a lot of financial institutions will do before they want to invest in a group. They'll look at their track record and things like that. So that's relatively easy for clients. We look at their cash position, right? How are they doing financially? Can they pay the bills? Things like that. For employees, it's a little different, where we've, over like many years, we actually attract a certain type of person. So lots of the interviews that we've done and the people that we've brought on, it's been again that 1 to 2 degrees of separation of somebody knowing someone that would really fit the culture, or
Mm-hmm.
someone that really has heard about Orix and how we value employees and there's different opportunities. And so there's lots of people that are actually looking to join the team, and we've attracted a certain diverse group. Um, when you meet somebody at a party, I think that I have pretty decent intuition. You could chat with two people, and one, you're like, you know what, I feel like I might want to have a beer with this person or a coffee. Like, there's a realness, there's an openness, there's a vulnerability. So we do ask questions about honesty and judgment and things like that. Sometimes you don't know until you work with somebody. But I would say, knock on wood, we have a pretty good track record. The individuals that are doing, let's say, the interviewing and the onboarding, are geologists, are people that have worked in the field, as well as HR. So then you can ask questions about, like, living with your coworkers and traveling for 2 or 3 weeks at a time and going to the Arctic and all of these things that might not be a traditional job things. And so through a series of questions, like, you try to wean that out.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you work with someone, it's pretty clear, right? If someone's curious, if they're asking questions, if they're owning up to mistakes, which I love. Like, it's okay if you make a mistake and just kind of own up to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're curious and you're constantly asking questions about why we're doing things, what's the purpose, So I think we've been lucky because we've been able to attract a certain type of person. It hasn't been that like we've got this crazy interview process that half the people are gone, half the people make it. We've been able to really have a pretty good process of the people that actually get interviewed more or less are there. It's just now, are they a good fit maybe technically, and do we have the opportunities there for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I don't know if maybe it's because we live in Northern Ontario, but I find the whole "can I have a beer with that person" is always like the baseline. I think for a lot of interactions, when you meet somebody for the first time, you're like, it was great, but like, could I socialize with them over a beer or a cup of coffee? And if I can't see myself in that scenario, then maybe it's not somebody I would want to spend any more time with than I have to.
Yeah. And in geoscience, it literally is part of the job. It doesn't necessarily have to be beer, but you are traveling with people like most of the time, you not all the time, but you could be gone for 3 weeks at a time. You could be living in a prospector's tent with somebody for 3 weeks. So are you respectful enough to, clean up your dirty socks at the end of the day? Like that's part of what makes you a good team member at Orix, right? Because you're living often with the people that you work with, so you do kind of want to have that coffee with that person at some point.
And what do you think? I think I know what it might be, but like, what do you think the business metric is that you realize when you have a philosophy like that? I mean, obviously employee retention goes up. You don't have as much like legacy planning you have to do between new hires, and there's more consistency in your workforce. But what does that mean like from a business perspective?
So one of the biggest metrics, and this is from my experience right now being in my role, like I'm more on the business side of things, right? At this point, although I still want to hear about the rocks and the projects. I think we know when we're doing a good job and when culture, like we got to stay with it and we are making these good decisions because things happen, right? And how about the bottom line and what does that mean when you're really putting things back into the company and really focusing on the team? I think when things go wrong and you actually come out of it in unique ways or innovative ways, like the pandemic is one of them. I haven't talked about that in a while, but it was a very big testament to the culture, to the diverse culture, the loyalty of the team, the trust of the team that then fosters innovation and creativity. To all come in with the ideas to, sometimes make sacrifices because we saw the bigger picture of everybody needed to stay working. We don't want to lose anybody. What can we do right now in this space that we have with what we can control to be successful as a business? And so I think was one metrics where we grew exponentially since that in terms of clients and branding and marketing and attraction of new employees, still maintained the retention piece that you talked about, Steve. So when those kind of struggles happen and then you really see the team come together, I think that for me is like a check mark. It's like, okay, that has paid off in the end.
For sure. Let's talk about that diversity a second. I was at an HR symposium, and I won't say the company, but it was a big miner. And they were talking about how maybe their workforce is maybe 10, at max 12% female. And I think that's probably, in the end user perspective, that's probably a good rule of thumb across Canada for gender diversity. Mike said it in the bio at the outset. You guys have 100% female leadership and 50%. We counted on the website too, from what we could tell. From what we could tell of
you fact checked. Good.
No, your bio confirmed it this morning because we were having to we did our own math. And then your bio came in like, oh well, this would have been easier rather than counting.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I guess the question is like, obviously this doesn't seem to me to be like a happy accident that you ended up being a geology firm that has 50% female employment in really key technical positions too, right? You said at the outset, that there's a bit of demystification that has to happen for more women and girls to get into geology. So could you talk about how the process like Orix is undertaken intentionally to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, and like I don't want to sound cliche, but it actually wasn't intentional, right? So Shastri and myself, we're both identified as female. So right away, we actually did not have gender parity because we only had females. So we had to hire some men to make it more diverse.
Sure.
So the first, 2 hires were females because they were friends of ours, and so that was fine. We have 0 quotas or anything like that, but we want to keep that percentage. Like ideally,
Wow.
this is what we want to keep. And
Yeah.
it's happened organically that we've hired the right person and it's 50-50, and then all of a sudden sometimes it's like 52% males, and then it goes back to like 53% female because the next hire happens to be female. So I think there's things we've done that definitely have contributed to that without us intentionally doing that. I think because we focused on corporate culture, that does attract a certain type of person. Because our job postings, we put on there our value system. That attracts a certain type of person. There is, and I like to say this often, but there's a statistic that females typically will only apply for a job if they think internally that they meet 95% of the criteria, but men will throw their name in if they meet like 60%.
Yeah.
So even small things like just changing the way that you put job postings and putting values in there, those are things that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean the same for men, but it will get females to be like, this seems like an interesting company to work for. So things like that are things that we would want to see in a company. We've implemented that in how we post jobs, how we do interviews, how we have a customized approach to the evolution of our employees. 10 years ago, very few of our employees had kids, including myself and Shastri. We had no kids. So many of our employees over the last 10 years have had kids, both, the men and our female staff. And so listening to each person and figuring out where are they in their stage of life? Are they wanting to do field work and take 2 months off to travel? Are they wanting to now do this? And obviously still making sure that we're there for the clients and we support them, because lots of field projects are out of town. But we've been able to do interesting things and advocate for the team as their lives have changed also, because we don't want to lose them. And this is what happens a lot of the times, that certain people do have kids and they are supported, on paper by their company, but not necessarily in the same way. So there's just certain things that we've done because we believe in it, and this is what we would want to see at a company. And so that has attracted a certain amount of people or a certain type of person. We also have about 30% of our staff that was not originally born in Canada. They're all here, and most of them we just hired from Canada. They're based out of either Sudbury, Toronto, or Winnipeg, but some of our employees are from Colombia, Brazil, Iran, South Africa. And again, I think that speaks to the diversity and the value system. Lots of our team members, their families do live elsewhere, and they want to be able to go. They only see them once a year. So they want to be able to go for maybe a month at a time and see their family. Well, why not make that work? Because they are an all-star employee for the other 11 months. And they are amazing. And if you want to go for 2 months, go ahead. Like let's talk about how we can make that work. So there's positives and negatives. Like, yeah, maybe sometimes there's certain things we could be doing if we just were focused on the bottom line. But I think because we focused a lot on corporate culture, it really has created us as like a successful company, sustainable company, to be able to weather the storms of whether it's the pandemic or the cycles. So yeah, I'm extremely proud of that. And when we first started, we didn't even tell people that we were 100% female owned, and it's almost embarrassing now to think about it, but it is what it is. We didn't do that. Nobody really knew us, and now I think it's a great thing. It always has been, but it's something that I think we forget about. And then when we do interviews like this, I realize like, yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like 70 employees and half of them are female. It's not common.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just put you on the spot quickly, Ashley, because, I know at the outset you said that you were a kid that didn't have, a rock collection growing up. So I'm a father of 2 young girls, and like they have both gone through rock collection phases. What would be your advice like to parents that are trying to nurture all sorts of interest in science to maybe consider, geology and exploration as something for them to keep in the back of their minds as they grow up and consider career options?
So one thing and that's really great that you asked that question. Actually, I think that lots of parents don't necessarily even know that geology is an option. And so one thing that we've done to just people that we know is we've gone to classrooms, and you probably have heard that this happens sometimes. There's lots of teachers that don't know about geology, lots of parents that don't know about it. So how do kids even know that that's an option in Canada? So if you have kids that are in elementary school, I know a lot of teachers that would say, oh my gosh, you want to teach one of my classes? Please do so. So, you know us amongst like other people. One thing would be asking the teachers if they want some support, and if you can introduce them to somebody who happens to be in geoscience, and would they be interested in doing kind of a lesson there. Every time we do those kinds of things, grade 3, grade 4, sometimes grade 8 or high school, we start off with who wants to be a geologist. Nobody lifts up their hand. By the time the class is done, all those little girls and those little boys are lifting up their hand, and they all want to be geologists. And it's one of those things you never know what thing kids are going to remember. And so the goal is just to expose them to everything.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I would recommend. There's also lots of really great organizations. There's one called Mining Matters, and they've got coloring books online. They have little activities and things like that to just kind of spark kids' interests. And in Sudbury specifically, I've recently relocated back. And there's usually an event every year. I think it's in February for the women and girls in science, and they do things for kids. So I've gotten a lot of comments from younger kids that when they see a female, it really makes them think like, oh my gosh, like I could do that too, right? It's like when you see a female who's in a leadership role and you realize that you could do that. So maybe, just you could show them examples of other females that are doing amazing things, and that could be a spark.
I think that's a great idea. My wife's a teacher, so she'll love that idea as well, because she's always looking for help.
Okay, hey, tell her to contact us if she wants any support there, for sure.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely do that. It's funny because they both are. My oldest is 6, and my youngest she'll be 3 in March, and they obviously different ages, but they've both kind of had their rock phases. Like Sophia's the youngest, and she's going through the phase where even we go to H&M, she's like grabbing rocks out of like the fake plants, and we're like, no.
Oh, really?
You can't take these rocks home.
I love that.
And then
That's
Steve
great.
and I were recently on a work trip, and we were out in Jasper, and I went to the top of this mountain, and I brought the girls home like a couple of rocks from the top of this mountain, which I thought was going to be really cool for them, and they could not care less that these rocks are from
They were
a mountain.
out of that phase.
So I guess maybe they're out of the phase, but it might come back. So I'll keep all of that in mind for sure.
Well, yeah, no, tell your wife to contact me if she ever wants some support there.
Okay.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to get them like a Brunton compass and put them in an underground mine drift or something. I don't think that'll do it.
Coloring is a big one. Whenever we go to classrooms, we usually do exercises that involve interpretation and coloring, because it is an artistic science. And this is the whole thing, trying to break that stigma that it's really all about chemical formulas. There's lots of art involved as well.
There you go. That's a good scenario for them to be in, Mike.
They both love coloring and drawing too. So I think maybe, there's something to this. Well, I'll keep you posted on how this goes.
That's great. Well, there is a downloadable coloring book online from Mining Matters. So there you go.
Okay.
Then you could print it on the college printer, Mike. Now, not to get us into
say that. Yeah.
not to get us into trouble.
You should edit that part from
Yeah. I say we leave it in.
I think we leave it in to see if anybody from the college listens. So
yeah.
So Ashley, we're coming to the end of our time together, and thanks for doing this. With some of the time when we have like cool companies on, we always want to give an opportunity for the company to say like what's next, where are you going next with the company? Where is this going? Is it more technological advancements? Is it just growing more client base? What's next for Orix?
Yeah, so that we always have lots of things on the go.
That you can share, of course.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, one thing that's exciting is we do want to grow our space in Sudbury. So I recently moved back, and we're really committed to growing in Northern Ontario. So that's really important for us. Where a big focus is on critical minerals. Obviously, that's where the world is going. That's where the industry is going. And so we're doing lots of work to making sure that we are ready for that, and that we could support companies as they want to go and enter the road to sustainability. So critical minerals is a big focus for us. Partnerships is really big. So we've got lots of ongoing conversations with whether it's financial institutions or engineering firms, because we really want to be that go-to to support all stakeholders within the industry. So lots of different partnership conversations going on there. And then we also are focusing on growing the digital transformation side. So that kind of scanning that historical information side of things, there is a never-ending repository of that. So really, really focused on that. Our company is in a mature stage right now. We're 10 years. So we're really honing in on that boutique firm and making sure that we've got all, kind of the consistency across the company, and that people really know that we are a go-to. We want to flip that consultant model and really, I don't want to say choose our clients, but people know, like, if they work for Orix, you are getting this, and we will raise your bar in terms of everything: diversity, ESG, technical expertise. So it's kind of like we want it to be pretty special to be a client of Orix's, right? And kind of flipping that consultant model and holding the industry accountable as well for certain things like ESG principles. So that's where we are right now. We're very, very busy supporting groups predominantly in Canada within the Canadian Shield, but we're always looking to grow that also.
Cool. There's nothing wrong with being an exclusive boutique firm, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're at 70 employees right now, and we've gone back and forth with 80 plus, and right now we think the secret sauce is to stay an exclusive firm. So keep that boutique firm, that corporate culture, that high quality of work, and then expand the business in other ways, as opposed to just growing the employee base.
That's great. That's terrific. Well, we hope to see more of Orix Geoscience around Sudbury now that you're expanding locally, and we can all get out of our caves now that
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. I had a tour of your space, a few months ago, and you guys are doing great work in Sudbury too. So it was really nice to have a chat with you guys there too.
Oh, thank you. Maybe we could do something together in the future, but for now, we'll say goodbye to Ashley Kirwan from Orix Geoscience. Thanks for being on the pod.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Appreciate it. Well, I guess that's my cue, Steve. We're back. That was a great interview.
Yeah, I had a great time.
What's your takeaway?
My takeaway is that I have to go on YouTube now and find Down to Earth with Dr. David Pearson. No, I mean, my takeaway, quite honestly, is, and I asked this of her, but that there's a clear connection between the company's bottom line and growth strategy and all of these sort of the human resource and culture things that they've planned out to do. And it's very interesting that they didn't plan to have 50% female, but the culture that they created, really did good work on attracting a more sort of equal representation of the public to apply for jobs there.
Yeah, and I think it just speaks to the fact we didn't necessarily get into exactly what some of those practices have been, but you could just tell that I think building that corporate culture at Orix, is taken 10 years, and I think they've been very deliberate and methodical with it. I think sometimes you encounter companies where they say they have a great corporate culture because they bought a foosball table and they threw it in a room, right? But like that's not what makes a culture. I think her point of focusing on who they work with, and then by extension attracting the right kind of people, the people that you can trust. And you could spend 2 weeks in a prospector's tent. I don't know if you and I could do that. I think
we spent 3 days in the mountains together.
In separate rooms though. So I think by the end of the day, if you didn't
to be clear, there were separate rooms.
Yeah. But I'm saying if at the end of the day you had those dirty socks out in the tent, I think you'd be going down the mountain, my friend.
Yeah. Well, and I thought it was really cool. And I had heard that before, I think, about the sort of how men sort of throw their resume at anything. And it's true, because like, why are we making such a laundry list of technical, very specific things we need? I think we're missing a lot of people when we screen for people that way. Like, we should be putting our flag in the air, telling people about our culture and attracting, anyone, who might fit the job position. If you need to be a geologist, there's your sort of baseline need. And then everything else should be about culture and expectations, right?
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, like as much as you can work and mentor somebody, like you can't teach some of those skills and qualities that I think a lot of companies like Orix are looking for. You can teach somebody how to become a better geologist or how to become a better grant writer, if we're taking our line of work as an example. But I think to be able to have those inherent skills and values that you want in your company, like that at the end of the day is just kind of you can't replace that. So
yeah. And again, we're sort of ending where we started, but the reason why I feel I have to say this is I chose Rockstar by Nickelback because, of course, geologists deal with rocks, and I feel that Ashley Kirwan is a star when it comes to that.
Oh,
So
I
he's
feel
a
like you
rock
didn't have
star.
to explain it. I think
Well,
we all, I think we all
thought-
got it.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of stuff about drug use in that.
Yeah, but I
song.
think we knew where you were going. I don't think.
Yeah, but
wow.
it bears repeating that
You know
she's
what?
a
You know
rock
what?
star.
The best jokes that you tell on this podcast are the ones that you explain.
Yeah,
So,
I think so. It's a very Norm Macdonald things to do. I've said in the past that those are my comedic influences, and I'm going to stick by it.
well, I appreciate your commitment to the bit.
There we go. Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.